What's up? Thanks for checking out the Hospitality Strategy Lab. My name is Jason Littrell, and I'm here with Leif Huckman from Prospitality because he came out with a new app that is helping servers and hospitality workers actually check their checks. So the name is a little on the nose, but it's called checkmychecks.com. He's opened it up for us right now if you want to go check it out. So welcome, Leif. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Jason. I really appreciate it. Happy to see you.
Of course, I'm so happy to see you. I was just telling Leif, I've known you for probably 15, 20 years now.
Yeah, it sounds about
And
right.
you don't look a day older than that time. I guess
I
it's
remember, I remember you from the Randolph, and I remember you because you gave me one of the most memorable hospitality experiences I ever had. I thought you were so kind and so generous, which was really atypical of the cocktail bar scene at the time. So I really took that with me. I have a very distinct memory of meeting you and having that experience and just being like, that's it. That's what it's about, you know?
So tell me about your business. Tell me about what you're working on. What's exciting right now?
Yeah. So I, for the last 2 years, was working as a beverage director for a small hospitality group in upstate New York. And it was great. I was working with Tabo Sommer from Freeman's fame, and he's built a really beautiful hospitality group up here, especially Innis, which is this resort in Akron, New York. Stunning property and really inspiring architecture and operation. And in that process, I was just, coming across systems and personnel issues, not atypical to working in other large corporations as I did in the past. And one of the pain points that I kept coming across was the tip sheets. With a business that's large and complex, tip systems can be a little bit less straightforward. And what you have is finance directors or accountants who are building out tip sheets, and they don't necessarily understand the operation. And then the people who are boots on the ground running the operation might not fully understand how to use and conform Excel or Google Sheets to the business operation. So there seemed like there was this gap of understanding. I'm comfortable in Excel. I'm comfortable with Google Sheets, so I could fix these tools. But what happened for me was I was coming, business after business after business and kind of seeing the same issues. And there wasn't a unified system. It was kind of like every manager at every location had a different tip sheet. And I was like, this should be uniform. We should be applying the same system, the same tool, the same accountability to every business. And then I started looking out and just saying there must be software for this because this seems like such an obvious pain point. There is. There's, I think, some relatively compelling software, but it doesn't really do what I needed it to do. It's costly, and it doesn't really focus on compliance. Most of the tools that are out there are really focused on same-day pay. They're really mostly fintech companies that are in the tip distribution space. They're not looking at the issue of the manager, and the pain point of the manager is I am exhausted after a 10 to 12 hour shift. I'm doing all of this manual data entry and that sucks. And I just want to make sure I'm doing it correctly. I just want to make sure that all my people are getting paid correctly. And then come payroll time, now I have to take all of that data and get it into my payroll system in an efficient manner. Most of the solutions that are out there are looking to solve, from my perspective, is remember how great it was to walk with cash tips back in the day? And we can't do that anymore because everybody pays with a credit card. So what if we could do that, but digitally? That's the pain point that they're solving. And I wanted to offer something different. I wanted to offer a solution that was really coming from the perspective of an operator manager, and then providing a level of transparency to the staff, so that one of the most common questions that was coming up is can you look at my paycheck? Can you just make sure that my paycheck is correct? So that's where Check My Checks came from. And that's where ProTip came from. And so ProTip was the primary tool that I've focused on. And that's what I raised money around to begin Prospitality. And that's what Prospitality was started for.
Prospitality is a software company, or is it
Prospitality
it's a company that comes up with fintech products?
Yeah. So Prospitality is a hospitality tech company, software company. And ProTip is the tip distribution software that we're developing. And Check My Checks was kind of born out of that because I was it occurred to me that the least likely user of ProTip, a tool that is centered around compliance, is the operator that might not care, which I think I think it's not the average operator. I think the average operator does care and is trying to do their best to be compliant. But I think that there are operators out there who are lackadaisical. you also have a workforce that can oftentimes feel like they don't have agency to complain. Because of that, I thought that there is a way to sort of democratize this. And it really is just math. So I could reverse engineer what ProTip is doing proactively. I could reverse engineer that logic from a pay stub. If you uploaded a pay stub and answered a couple of simple questions, I could tell you whether that pay stub was compliant or not. So that's what we built. I started building Check My Checks myself, not having done any kind of software coding before, but I think also with the kind of rise of AI and AI supported platforms, I was able to iterate something first I'd spent like 50 hours coding by hand a very rudimentary React tool for Check My Checks. And it was functional, but it wasn't good. It wasn't like
So
reliable.
you went in there and did the work. Because
I
I was
did at
just like,
first.
once Replit and Bolt came out, I was like, this is a cheat code. Like that means I don't have to learn how to do this stuff. But
Yeah.
it was garbage. Like the stuff that I quote unquote made was garbage.
Well, I felt similarly. I mean, when I first got, it was exciting. I think I just wanted to also understand the language of coding, that if I was going to be working with developers, I needed to understand how to speak to them and how to like manage the workflow and really understand what job it is that they were doing if I was going to be kind of holding them to account.
I got a question for you about the size of the problem. So like, let's say that the operator is just like is just lackadaisical, or they don't care, they don't know. And we're talking about the property of their staff, right? Their tips.
Correct.
Their tips are their
Correct.
property, and then
Yeah.
they are being handled and managed by the owner, right? So what is the liability? What is the risk of not understanding how that works and not getting that right?
I think that one of the most compelling metrics is from the Economic Policy Institute, put out a study in 2024 that looked at wage theft between 2023 and 2024 and estimated that in the United States, they had recovered over $1.5 billion in wage theft due to state, local, and federal efforts to protect against wage theft. So if you want to look at that as an average metric, same institute, the Economic Policy Institute, estimated that over the 10 most populous states, wage theft accounted for a loss of about 3,300 per employee, per
Per
year,
year.
per year. So this is a significant issue. It's also like from 2020 to 2012, wage theft claims had increased by over 400%. Kathy Hochul's administration has been really pushing on wage theft as an issue, a persistent issue that needs to be addressed in New York State. And the hospitality sector is a ripe candidate for it because we're dealing with like a lot of, I think the workforce in hospitality is often underrepresented categories of people. You have immigrants, you have people of unknown legal status, you have women, you have LGBTQ, you have young people. So every demographic that you can imagine that is perhaps afraid of retaliation or doesn't feel like they have a platform to fight against those who already have power, they're represented in hospitality. And this is, I think, also one of the ways in which tech and maybe even AI can really do good. That when we're talking about things that are like straight math, like computers are really good at math. And we can let computers do that. And what you need to do is just be able to give people free access to it. And that's what Check My Checks seeks to do.
I thought it was interesting that there's no opt-in, there's nothing, there's no fee, which is pretty rare because typically people would use that as like something like a lead magnet where they're saying like, we would like you to opt into our marketing in exchange for this free tool.
I think it's important. I think that I'm asking for some sensitive data from an employee. I'm asking for their pay stub. So there's a lot in there that somebody might be unwilling to share with me if they thought that I was attaching their name to it. And if I'm asking for their email, I'm attaching their name to it in some way, shape, or form, or some sort of personal identifying information. So I talked with the developers. I talked with friends who have a lot more experience in the security sector of tech, and also with my attorneys to see how we could develop the tool so that it extracted from a data that's useful to me, metrics that are actually useful for me to pitch and promote and improve upon the system while also protecting the users of it. As a monetization strategy, I'm still not sure. And that's why it's, I'm still in like MVP beta test mode, but I have assumed, and I still assume, that the best use case for it might be if there's wide adoption, it could just be an advertising platform. I might, sell some advertising space to other hospitality businesses. And if it has enough traffic, then that's how I would be able to monetize it.
Well, I would imagine that the biggest beneficiary of this is the second. I'm not sure if it's the biggest or second biggest, but it's like the owner is relieving themselves of an enormous amount of liability if they get this wrong. Because if you get sued for wage theft, that's like even if you have insurance, even if you have great lawyers, it's still expensive and it's still a massive pain in the ass.
Even EPLI insurance, there's always like, there's going to be, what is it like, not, what's the word, not minimums, but you're going to have to pay up to $10,000 out of pocket
Yeah,
anyway.
like the
And then
premium. Yeah,
your EPLI insurance is going to kick in. So it's not, and it's also reputational damage, which you can't necessarily come back from, like if you were to be sued for that, that's hugely detrimental to a business and its reputation and what that's going to do to, being able to hire staff on again.
I'm with you. I give the independent hospitality operator the benefit of the doubt. Oftentimes, we're talking about people that are great craftspeople, but may not be great at business.
Yeah.
They open
It-
up
I
to
totally
get
agree.
their friends and family to give them money, and
Yep.
then they open up a
I think that you get into hospitality because you are passionate about offering a service or a product to people. I don't think the average operator is getting into the hospitality business because they're passionate about business, and that's a big difference. That's a big differentiator, and it's not because they don't want to do the right thing. Like my honest belief is that the wage theft that exists in the hospitality industry is largely not due to malice. It's largely due to unintentional wage theft because people don't understand some common labor laws. Even I continue to deepen my understanding of the nuances of some of these labor laws. I was looking into the logic of our blended overtime rate calculator and realized that what I also needed to input in there was that there's a minimum overtime rate that you need to take into account. So even if you're using the proper formula, which is like total compensation divided by total hours to come up with a blended rate, if that does not meet the minimum threshold of 1.5 times minimum wage less the tip credit, right, of 550 if you're in New York City, which ends up coming out to 1925. So if your blended rate doesn't equal 1925, you have to use 1925. I didn't know that. This is like new information for me, and I've been doing this for 20 years. These are
It
things
seems
that,
like it's. I'm just picturing this like this bar owner with a plunger in one hand and a calculator in the other, being like, "Which one am I going to do now?"
yeah,
And they're going to be like, I'm not picking up that fucking calculator." He
yeah,
goes straight to the
right,
credit because
yeah.
they're exhausted. They're like, I cannot math this right now.
No, and
I mean,
and this is the thing too. It's like we're dealing with this sensitive information like tips, and we're doing it at the worst time of the day. We're doing it at the end of the night when we're totally exhausted, when we're bleary-eyed from running our business for, God knows you've been answering emails since you opened your eyes that morning. And, maybe it's 1 a.m., maybe it's 2 a.m., maybe it's 5 a.m., who knows? I know that feeling. And again, I think also even managers who have all of the best intentions, they're trying their best, but payroll is due by, Wednesday at 5 p.m. So you're going to do your best and then you're hitting send and you're just like there's a little bit of like crossing fingers and hoping that it's going to go well. It doesn't have to be that way. This is math. This is something that tech is really good at solving.
yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, what are your predictions for the hospitality business? I mean, things have been pretty brutal, especially lately. I mean, aside from the political just whateverness that is happening right now, it's been a ruthless business from the beginning, and people are eating home more, they're dining out less, and they're spending way less money. What do you think is going to happen?
I think the short term is going to be painful because I think that what I've seen is that you have two types of operators that are insulated from the present moment. I would say fast casual spaces in which, you're really you're not really going to, you actually might even gain as people are tightening their wallets. They might opt in for the fast casual dining experience more readily than they would a seated formal dining experience. And then the operators that are offering an elevated service to the 1%, they're not hurting right now. In fact, those spaces are not hurting. Those spaces are still doing very, very, because those customers are insulated financially. They're not feeling that same kind of pinch. So who's suffering? It's actually probably most of my favorite spaces, those like casual dining spaces that offer really elevated food and beverage. Spaces that come to mind are places like Diner and how Marlowe and Sons used to be. They're seated, formal dining spaces, but they're not formal environments. They're casual environments. I think that's where you're going to lose some of the casual diners who maybe can't go out now 2 times a week. Maybe they have to go out 1 time a week. And maybe when they do go out, maybe they end up splurging because that's like their special one night out. So they're going to opt for a higher price point option, or they're hurting and they're not going to go to that middle tier. They're going to go to a lower tier space. So in the short term, I think we're going to see probably some changeover, some businesses closing down and a little bit of a reshuffling of spaces. In the long term, I think that these are places that really matter, and that these, like any great hospitality business, you're offering an amenity to a community, and the communities want those spaces. We might see more efficient ways of addressing labor. And I think that a metric that I've been learning more, and I'm really trying to see how I can best encourage the businesses that I'm working with as a consultant to look at, is that the customer served per labor hour metric. So what is the sweet spot of how many people you need on the floor to be able to offer a reasonable and efficient service to a seated customer? I think that really hitting that sweet spot is what could potentially change the game. I think we both know that labor is one of the biggest stressors of a business, but it's not just labor, it's rent, it's cost of goods. And we've seen this rise, especially in New York City. All of these things are rising, right? Labor costs continue to rise as minimum wage rises. I think we all support minimum wage rising. We don't not want that to rise, but that becomes another stressor on the business. Rents are going up. That becomes a stressor on the business, and costs of goods are going up. Tariffs are pushing costs of goods up. This becomes a stressor on the business. So we need to be able to cut costs somewhere. We can't do it with rent. If you sign that, you sign your lease, you're not going to change that number. You're not going to change your cost of goods number. You don't have control over that. You have to buy from the purveyors that you're buying from. You might make some choices, and I certainly work with my businesses to look for efficiencies, look at portion sizes, creating, I guess, there can be that kind of shrinkflation approach, but that's also not always good for the optics from a customer base. So labor ends up being the first place that you really look to try to create more efficiency.
Okay, so that's like one of the. So when you come into your consulting clients, you're saying what's the process of onboarding a new client and identifying and diagnosing where you're going to work on?
Yeah, I look at, so some of the things that I mentioned first is just to get an understanding of what their targets are. What are their target sales? And then looking at what's actually happening. What's their target labor and what's actually happening? What's their target cost of goods and what's actually happening? What systems do they have for measuring these things in real time? Because a P&L call the 20th day into the next month is way too late. So we have weekly check-ins to look at these metrics to understand what's happening, where the trend is going, and then we start iterating on different decisions going into it. And it's always a two-pronged battle. It's not just cutting. It's also increasing sales and looking for any opportunity to increase sales to help those metrics.
Well, is that a marketing conversation or is that a sales conversation?
I think it's a marketing conversation, but I think marketing not marketing through advertising, but I think marketing through activating through events, looking for ways to connect to the local community or bring in cultural events. And this is a conversation I was having recently with the Donna team too, that it's one thing to get a brand to come in and sponsor a night, but the truth is the brand is really typically not going to they're not the draw. The brand is kind of like a benefit, and you might get, they might spend a little bit of money at your establishment when they're visiting you, but they're really expecting you to bring people in the door to see their product. The sweet spot is when you have a cultural event that really resonates with your followers, with your clientele, and something that you believe in and it is authentic to you and your identity and your brand identity. And if you can pair that with a great brand, that's a win-win scenario. And that can really kind of be the rising tide that raises all ships. I think that a lot of businesses can get caught in some vanity metrics. I think that social media can be a time suck. I think that getting a brand to come and sponsor, hey, we're having a party and this brand is sponsoring, it's that's great. How are the sales? Did your sales go up from last week? Because if they didn't, then you've kind of wasted everybody's time.
Yeah. Those are some, the times that we went into Donna, Not only were you an extremely staff focused operator, like you were really kept the needs of the staff, which is why everybody loved working there. But how you connected with the community was really, really interesting. And I just remember seeing this over years of people coming and going and working there, and everybody was really good at their job. Everybody really loved it, and they were just happy to be at work. And, you know, from a marketing standpoint, that's probably where you'd start.
I mean, I think your staff is your best. They're your best brand reps, right? Like as a business operator, as a hospitality space, and the places that I worked in that were positively inspiring to me were places that I was just very proud to be a part of. You know, again, Marlowe and Sons, like that was a really really inspiring space to work at, and showed me how you can create. Like I think that's another thing too. It's like I didn't go into opening up a bar because I knew very much about business. I really had to learn quickly on the job and kind of learn through the school of hard knocks.
You were an actor, right?
I was an actor and then I was a musician. I mean, really, out of acting school, I started. You were a musician too. I started a band and I was a touring musician for like 5 years, and then was like, okay, if I love playing music, and I was bartending to pay my bills, and sort of fell into the scene at the time that the cocktail craft movement was like ascending. So really like right place, right time. I was working at Freeman's. I worked with like
Same.
Marrero and Yama Wolfson and Jimmy Kearns and like, Toby Maloney, like all of these just monsters in the scene who were just incredible. And they were really, really generous. And it was the first time that I was really also like inspired to think about what I was drinking in the same way that we ask questions about food, as slow food was sort of taking hold and people are like, well, how is how is the cow being raised? And where does this vegetable come from? Like
What is
we
the
weren't
name of the chicken? Yeah.
yeah. We weren't asking those same questions about booze, and
Yeah.
I didn't even, here I am like going out all the time. And I was like, I don't know what's the difference between bourbon and rye? Like, I don't know. So I had to learn those things. And I mean, long story short is like, like when I feel like working in those spaces showed me that, yeah, I don't know. You felt proud to be a part of it. And I felt like, oh yeah, I know. I was going to say is culture. I didn't understand company culture as a concept, and I think when I had heard that term used before, I thought that was like corporate speak, like the culture of this company. We're a family here, and I was like, well, that's bullshit, right?
We're not a family.
No, we're not. We're not. We're
We
here to
can
be
be
a
good
group.
friends, but we're not a
Yeah,
family. Yeah.
exactly. I realized later that I think when I first came into Donna and I first opened it, I thought it was all about the people. So it was all about assembling this team of people that I just loved. And the opening team was just an incredible group of human beings, but it didn't have systems. And then when the fire happened and Donna was shut down and I had to come back, I had to try to put the lightning back in the bottle. And I was like, oh, okay, now, and I lost some of those people during that period of time. So I was like, I need systems. It's all about systems. And I started putting all these systems into place. And that was great, but I lost some of the magic and some of the spark. So I realized eventually that culture is the blend of those two things. It's creating really good repeatable systems and then finding people and matching people to those systems. Because great people are not always going to work in one system. They might not be a good fit. A really talented person wasn't always. I worked with some really talented bartenders who were not a good fit for Donna, and they were amazing at other establishments, but they weren't right for what we were doing. They didn't fit with the culture that we had there.
So, one of the biggest complaints I hear from my clients is about staffing labor. Do you advise your clients on how to recruit, how to train, first 100 days, stuff like that, how to get feedback from your
Absolutely.
staff? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So it starts with a job description for first of all. So you have to really understand what it is that you're hiring for, and they have to be really clear metrics that are accountable, metrics that you can really hold people to account for. Then I really believe in like the 30, 60, 90. I think that's really important as you're onboarding something for two reasons. One, you have the liability of once you pass that 90-day mark, if you want to terminate somebody, it becomes more difficult. You're more liable to have some sort of issue with Department of Labor in that regard. And that
I
first
didn't know.
90-day
I didn't know
threshold.
that. What is
Yeah,
the
I mean, this
distinction
is in New
between day
York
one
State,
and
so
day
this
90?
might not be true in other states, but in New York State, you have a 90-day, trial period essentially.
And that's
I
protected by law.
Yeah, I mean, it just means
I've
that
never heard of
it's called at-will employment. So in New York State, New York State is an at-will employer state. For 90 days, you can terminate somebody without cause. You can just say like, sorry, don't, it's not working out. There you go. No reason. Just, it's not working out. Not a good fit. If you aren't meeting with those people, though, it's really not fair. If you haven't clearly set out, this is what I'm asking of you, and then you're not checking in with them to tell them their progress towards that ask, and you're managing that with mutual accountability, right? Then it feels personal. And I think that's what ends up creating more of these, like, what can feel like toxic environments, is where people feel like it's personal. They didn't like me because, and they start filling in the gaps of why they think they were terminated. And we live in, I think, such a divisive moment in time also, that the narratives that can be written can be sometimes like the least generous assumptions being made of either side. And I think that's a systems problem. I don't think that's a people problem. I think that's because you're just not using good enough systems of accountability. You haven't created a really clear ask for what this role is about. Maybe you're not even applying that ask fairly across your team. And then you're not checking in with people and showing them how are they doing towards that thing. I honestly believe, from all of my years of management, that everybody wants to do a good job. It's really hard to do a good job if the target keeps moving, So make the target really clear. And I think that most of the time it is clear. I think it's just that operators who are stressed out or spread thin, they might not be really being accountable to themselves, so then it becomes even more difficult for them to hold other people accountable.
Your lips to God's ears. I mean, I say it all the time. So where does the rubber meet the road? Like, where do you say, like, okay, here's your first 90 days program. What do you do? Put that into a Google Calendar or put it into a spreadsheet, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I've created a system that's inspired by Google's OKRs, which you're probably familiar with, but it's
objectives and key results, something like that.
That's right. Objectives, key results, and required actions, right?
Required action. Thank you.
I use this for my own accountability with my investor for Prospitality, and I find it really useful. I like accountability, and I also love the visualization of that progress, but I also find it very clunky. It's like the language of OKR I find really clunky, and I struggled to remember what OKR stood for like many, many months. So I renamed it, and I've created a system that's very similar. It's called VOWS, Vision, Action, Outcome. So you have a vision for what it is you want to achieve. These are the actions you're going to take to get to that vision. And then what's the outcome of the actions that you took? And we rate it on a 1 to 5 scale, and we put a deadline and we assign it to somebody. And this is how I'm able to not just have a meeting. What was happening with my clients initially was that we would have a meeting. It'd be really great. We'd come up with some incredible ideas. I'm just like an idea machine. Like, if you give me a problem, I'm just gonna be like, oh, what you could do is blah, 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 blah. Great. If we don't do anything about that, it's a waste of everybody's time. And the next week we're having the same conversation. I'm coming up with 10 more great ideas that are going nowhere, right? So the vows gave us a structure by which we could say, like, okay, this is what we're trying to get to. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is actually what's going to happen this week. Before we meet next week, you're going to do A, B, and C. And then we're going to measure the outcome of that. We're going to give it a rating. And those metrics can be different. Some of the metrics I've used most recently too have been like, how about your level of stress? One of the metrics we're going to rate is like, do you feel more stressed or less stressed this week? Give me your stress level rating on a 1 to 10 scale. That's really valuable, because one of the things that we're also trying to get to is not because I'm trying to pretend to be somebody's therapist. That's not my lane at all.
Sometimes that's what they need.
It is. But just, to keep it like squarely in the business lane, which is where I feel more, able to be a supportive person. I do want to reduce their stress level. I want these actions to reduce their stress level. So that can be a metric. Yes, sales are going to be a target. Efficiencies across these various KPIs that we've talked about are a target. But also, like, how do you feel? Like, is it working? Do you feel better about your business today than you did yesterday? If so, great. Let's keep going. If not, that's useful information. Let's try something else.
How do you warehouse this information? Is it Post-it notes on the wall? Do you use like Trello or project management software? How do you do that?
Initially, and still, like, I think I've become really comfortable in, and it's easy to train and keep people within the Google space of like Google Sheets and Google Docs. But On the side, I've been building out a platform for hospitality performance tracking called Clarion, which is also available if people wanted to check it out. It's clarion.prospitality.com. It is live, and what it does is everything that I've just described. You're tracking your projected sales against your actual sales. You're tracking your labor costs and your product costs as a combination, so prime costs to try to get to 60% or under. And you're also tracking your rent efficiency. That's kind of how everything started. And then I've incorporated into that platform this VOWS structure. So what it does is take the results of what's happening and then turns those into actionable steps. And the latest example of that is including a scheduling platform onto it. So not only are you looking at what your labor has been, but let's actually build a schedule using your 6-week trend line of sales and see what is your labor going to look like if you schedule the way that you wanted to schedule based on your sales trend. Does that make sense? Or are you heavy and you might want to shave a couple hours here and there? I think a lot of times too, what I will caution is that it doesn't have to be an axe. It can be a scalpel. Sometimes it's like shaving 30 minutes off a call time is what you needed to do. And you do that over 7 days a week. All of a sudden you've saved, 3.5 hours. Like that ends up becoming really valuable for a business in terms of trying to achieve a labor target number.
Well, I just signed up for an account with Clarion. It's this is great. This
Cool,
is
man.
exciting.
Yeah.
It took me that long. Took me 7 seconds.
There you go.
And that's amazing. I think these are it's really fascinating where your head is at with this stuff.
Yeah.
And if I owned a restaurant, I would hire the shit out of you for sure.
Thanks, man.
Because it's like this stuff is not my strength. This stuff is like the numbers and like even knowing what to look for. Like you mentioned a metric or a KPI that you look at, which is like labor hours per, like the ratio of labor hours
Customers served per labor hour. Yeah.
Customers served
Like the
per
number
labor
of
hour.
customers served. Yeah, because this becomes really interesting because like, you set a shift and you're like, okay, I'm going to put a schedule and let's say the schedule is going to be 6 to 8 hours, probably closer to 6, but like your servers are working 6-hour shifts, your bartenders are working 8-hour shifts, and you just kind of plot that across your 7 days of the week or 5 days of the week. And you just assume that that's what needs to happen. But if you look at the customer flow traffic, there's like a lot of dead time. There's a lot of time where people are not doing very much to serve. That doesn't mean they're not busy. It doesn't mean that they don't have other side work to do or setting up the room. But if you can look at your foot traffic, it's a different lens to look at staffing. And it's influenced the way that we've staffed some of our businesses, where it's all of a sudden we're like, you know what? The server doesn't really need to show up an hour early. The server can really show up at the start of service because we're really not serving a ton of customers in that first hour between 5 and 6. So the server's coming in at 5. They're going to detail the floor during that time. They're going to handle the tiny little trickle of customers. And it's that KPI that helped us come to that discovery. So really looking at like number of customers served, how many bodies do you need to do that efficiently?
All right, this is fascinating stuff. That's all the time we have for today. But Leif Huckman from Prospitality, and he created this app called
Check My Checks.
checkmychecks.com, which is basically a community service, a free community service where you can actually check your paychecks to see if you're getting properly compensated or if there's some fuzzy math in there due to some clerical error. Again, I love where your perspective is that like, these people are not assholes. They are just making mistakes, which is I'm the kind of person that would make those kind of mistakes. And you're asking questions. I think what's really most fascinating is that you're asking questions and coming up with formulas of things, of indicators that most people wouldn't even think to look at. We always look at sales. We always look at how many Instagram followers we have, but those are not always the most honest or least vanity metrics that are available to you. Is there anything else that you want to share before we chop up?
Yeah, just to say that I really do, as you were mentioning, like it helps to check like that. My assumption is that wage theft, if there is wage theft, it's unintentional, that there's honest mistakes that are happening. If you use Check My Checks, this isn't a gotcha tool. This is a trust builder. So far, the people who have used Check My Checks, I have a 50% compliance rate. So that's an interesting little metric to know right now. Like 50% of the users have fully compliant pay stubs. The other 50% have had some question marks around it. We simply put it out as a possible issue. That's the only flag. It's not like go to jail. Like this is just like possible issue, follow up with your employer. What we really want to do is address any potential issues before they become larger issues. And I encourage any users of the platform to use it in that manner. It's, check your pay stub. If you see an issue, talk to your employer and address it. If they're truly uninterested in helping you, that's when you can take it up a notch and go to the Department of Labor or potentially seek out legal advice.
Yeah, chances are they're going to want to fix it because that's way cheaper than a lawsuit.
Exactly.
So just one last question. Do you have enough data to inform a through line with the compliant checks versus the non-compliant ones? Like, is it a certain payroll provider that's really good, or is it a POS system that just gets it right? Or
I don't have that. I don't have enough of that. I don't have that data coming through. That's an interesting question. That would be another layer to add to my dashboard. Like, I get my own dashboard of information off of the pay stubs that are analyzed.
anonymously?
And I've also been careful to I really want, it's completely anonymized. So I don't know who has what problem. I don't see the users' names. There is no space for them to put their name into the system or the schema of the data to extract. I do see employer names and I see issues. I do not know what issue which employer had, So what I
That's
have seen
OCR.
so far is mostly it's spread of hours. I think spread of hours is one of the trickier labor laws that people don't fully understand. And that seems to be the most common wage violation that is coming up.
You need like a PhD to be on top of this stuff. Like, this is why I think that I feel like every restaurant should have like every restaurant, in my opinion, is an HR company. And the cost of getting this stuff wrong, and not only that, but also the laws change all the time,
They change every year. I mean, every year this stuff is getting updated. And how many? This is what also kind of prompted me to pro tip. It's like, how many tip sheets have been updated to match the new labor the wage minimums? I don't think that people are keeping up with these things and updating their internal systems, and also with turnover of management. We have managers who are inheriting systems that came before them. They don't even know where to look. They don't know where to look in the formulas in the Excel sheet or the spreadsheet to see how was this designed, and did they hard code the minimum wage, or is the minimum wage a variable that can be updated over time? So this is, again, this is where I think tech actually can do some good.
All right, thank you so much, Leif Huckman. It's so great to catch up with you, and
You too,
I will
man.
see
Thank
you
you
next
for
time.
having me.
I'm gonna put all your stuff in the show notes, so
Okay.
so you guys can check out Prospitality.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.